when I think about Mark's and my relationship earlier on, yes, he had a hidden agenda and he was doing things that were not truthful. And I was also not sharing a lot of my truth about some of my sorrow, my sadness, my aloneness. And so he had no idea that that was going on for me. So moving into a thriving relationship was really him getting honest about what he was doing, me getting honest about what I was feeling and thinking and needing. And as we both started, bringing that truth to our relationship, it just started to grow and grow and grow.
Welcome to the Faithful and True podcast. We're here today with Debbie Laaser, our founder, and Greg Miller, our director of men's workshops and the host of the Faithful and True podcast. And we have gathered again today to continue a conversation that we started last time about truth-telling.
And you know what? In our last podcast, if you were able to listen to it, we just talked about the complexity of the issue, that the hiding and lying comes from some old wounds, some old core beliefs. I often think of that movie, A Few Good Men, and Jack Nicholson does that famous quote of, "You can't handle the truth." Mm-hmm. Well, most of us that hide and lie have this old core belief that people can't handle our truth, and that if they were to really know us, they would leave us and reject us and we would be alone. And so we want to talk more about how do we transition from this place of hiding and lying, and why is it important that we live as truth tellers? And I often tell the men that the counseling center that I went to early in my own recovery, one of the quotes I heard often is, the stuff that you're not talking about the most is the stuff that defines you the most. And so for those of us who might believe, well, it's maybe just a little white lie, or even if it's a huge lie, I'm not hurting anybody by keeping it to myself. One of the things to understand is those things that we're not acknowledging within our own selves actually are very formative and can be driving us in other ways that we're not even aware of.
Mm-hmm. And I believe, too, that one of our goals, ideally, no matter if it's in a counseling process or we're just working on ourselves by ourselves, is becoming the person that we feel God has created us to be. Transparency, I think, and being a truth teller are those characteristics that I think we're called to be. And so even though we might say something that we believe doesn't affect anybody else, if it isn't truthful, I think it affects us as a person and our own spiritual growth. So I like to talk to women about doing things that you would do in public or private or anywhere, so you're congruent, you're consistent with being the same person wherever you are. And that can feel very good, to not feel like you're divided up and you have to be somebody different in different situations.
We tell the men, to the extent that we are known is the extent that we can be loved. And so anything that I'm holding back, that part of me that I'm afraid is too much, that I will be judged for, rejected for, I'm holding on to that, and I'm actually reinforcing that old belief that if people knew me, then I would be alone and would be rejected. And I've often heard you talk to the men about this idea of when we do a full disclosure, when we share the full truth of our story and our experiences and our sexual history, one of the things that we're pushing against is that core belief that if people knew me, I would be alone. Part of my story is there was this significant explosion and exposure. Many people found out about what I had done. And one of the things that was true is prior to that, I really did have that core belief that if people knew me, I would be alone. And what I discovered was that there were a lot of people who did walk away once they knew my story. And what is also true is there were people who walked towards me. They could know me and they could understand. They could see that last 10% that I didn't want to talk about and still be with me in that. And that is one of the best gifts that we give to others and we give to ourselves when we have the courage to be able to tell the truth and be open and honest about what it is that's going on. Mm-hmm. So I want us to talk about just kind of what is that journey of moving towards the truth. And I believe part of that is beginning with self-awareness. That if I don't have self-understanding or if I don't have self-awareness, it's going to be difficult to be honest and transparent I often tell the men that if you can't be honest first with yourself, you're going to have difficulty being honest with others. And the lies that we tell with the most confidence to others are the lies that we first believe. And so part of what we're going to work on with a man is to begin to work on that self-awareness piece. A simple example would be many times, in our groups, we'll ask a man, what is he feeling? And sometimes the answer is nothing, or I don't, And the reality is when he says nothing, he's really not being honest. He's just not being self-aware, because there is probably something that he's feeling. It's just not accessible. So I can't be transparent with others if I'm not self-aware first.
And that would be true for the wives too, which is why we start all of our groups and sessions typically with how are you feeling? And we begin to realize that while we think we know what we're feeling, or we think we're talking about our feelings and our thoughts, the truth is we're not always. And even women come and say, I had to think the whole way over here because I wasn't sure what I was thinking, what I was feeling this morning. And so self-awareness is something I think we begin to practice first thing here. And it's not as easy as as you would think, to be able to put words to what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and then to be able to articulate that to another person.
And you don't like the answer, fine.
No, not fine.
I'm
good
fine.
Or tired. We try to stay away from those.
And part of it is, if we have an aspect of us that is kind of a performance addict or an approval addict, what happens is we're constantly living with a standard that we believe we're supposed to meet. And intentionally or unintentionally, for those of us who grew up in the church, we're given this standard. I often say we're told what to believe before we can believe it, and we're told how to live before we can live it. And so we try to perform those things. And so one of the reasons that we're not honest and transparent is we're afraid it's not acceptable. Maybe we've been told that certain emotions aren't acceptable. For instance, if you were constantly quoted the scripture, count it all joy, and you're feeling sad or, depressed or grief, then maybe you're believing, well, those aren't acceptable. I'm supposed to be joyful at all times. Or if I was told, be anxious for nothing, remember the birds of the air and the field and the lilies of the field. Well, then suddenly I'm thinking, well, I have to hide my anxiety because it's not acceptable. So part of it is not just the self-awareness, but having the courage to believe that all parts of you are acceptable in the community, and that you can bring those, even those things that you feel are rejectable, can be accepted.
So maybe that brings up the point, Greg, that one of the ways we believe people work on this the best is in community, which is why groups, I think professionally led groups, are so important to us. Because when you think about it, you do need other people around you who will accept whatever it is you're feeling and thinking and needing. And if you're not good at that, chances are you didn't grow up in an environment where that was welcomed. And so if we just try to go back into the same system that minimized it or denied certain things about us, we probably won't make much progress in there. So practicing with others who are practicing also to be self-aware and to talk about those things becomes a really great first step.
Absolutely. And, the thing about groups, a lot of times people can believe that groups are a good idea. But the reality is, and one of the things that we teach here, are groups are essential. We will not do recovery in isolation. We must have the community, because it's in the context of community that we are able to experience grace. It's in the context of community that we are able to shed our shame. We need others in our lives to see us and to affirm us and to bless us and to free us. And it's not just acknowledging the truth to myself or even speaking the truth to God. There is a powerful experience when I bring my truth to community, and these men, or in the case of women, these women can be with me in whatever that truth is. And, if I'm not speaking about it, if I'm not acknowledging it, I continue to be held hostage by the lies that those core beliefs or those experiences have created for me.
Yeah, the core beliefs are so powerful in our lives, those things that we really took on from other people. And, sorting out what we believe today amongst other people who are doing the same is so important, so that we can get out of this, I should feel this or I should do that, rather than knowing what is right for you. And that just takes a lot of practice in order to do what is right for you so you can be authentic and congruent yourself, which will prevent you from probably the desire to lie or fib or hide or cover up. They all go together, don't they? Because the more we do more of that being authentic, the less need we have to also skirt around the truth.
Absolutely. And I kind of mentioned this, but this idea that the lies that we tell to others begin with the lies that we tell to ourselves. And so many of these negative core beliefs that we had that we begin to believe from childhood, those are the lies also that are holding us hostage. If truth sets us free, lies imprison us. And so if I have lies about myself, and kind of the way that I talk about shame are the lies I believe about myself and the lies I believe about God. So if I believe I'm worthless, if I believe I'm hopeless, if I believe that I'm unlovable or unchoosable, I will live out of that lie, and that lie creates bondage. It's only when I begin to expose those lies to others and they can speak truth back to me, and those old wounds that created those lies can be healed, that's when I create freedom. We don't think our way to a new core belief. We heal our way to a new core belief, and that healing is what brings freedom. Truth is not just the communication of accurate facts. Truth is the personhood of Jesus. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So it's not just I'm telling the truth when I can regurgitate accurate facts. It's when I experience the truth and then I have that experience with others that I begin to experience freedom.
So I want to get practical about one of the things we said is that we often don't tell the truth when there's a reaction from the other person, whether they're angry or whether they're anxious, or we create some emotion in them that we feel we wish they didn't have to experience, or we don't want to have to listen to what they're saying. I think one of the practical ways that we can work on telling the truth is visiting how we will respond to others' unhealthy responses to us. And so that we can stay congruent in our own conversation, and it's not tied to whether we're going to get a good response or not. So, for instance, if you decide to share something hard, gosh, honey, I spent a lot of money on these clothes this week, and, somebody responds by like, we don't have that kind of money, and you just blew the budget for the month or whatever. We need to know how we're going to respond to that. Are we going to apologize? Are we going to say, maybe we need to let this calm down a little bit before we talk about it more, or why I felt the need to do this? So I think having a practical conversation with yourself about how you will work on changing what you do, not based on how someone will respond to you, but what's true for you, is a good idea.
Yeah, it's an idea that I can be safe no matter what your reaction is.
Right.
But if my safety is tied to your reaction, then I will never be safe because I have to manage your reaction. And that's that's one of those truths that set me free, is that someone can be angry with me, or someone can be distant from me, and I can be safe. One of my big triggers is withdrawal. And so if somebody withdraws from me, I start to panic and start to feel like I have to do something to kind of hustle and get them back into relationship with me. But if I can remind myself of the truth, someone can withdraw and I can be safe, then I'm much more likely to share information that may result in them withdrawing, because at the back end of that, I know I can be safe and my safety isn't dependent upon their reaction. Right. And that takes a lot of effort and energy. And for the man who doesn't want to share his story of acting out with his wife because of her reaction, it will be important that he understand she gets her reaction. So whatever the truth is she gets her reaction and he can still be safe in that moment. And that's one of the things that we work on with couples when we are planning for a full disclosure. We work with the women to get ready to hear the information, and we also prepare the men to get ready for her reaction to the information, because we want both of them to know that they can be safe in that moment no matter what the information is or what the reaction is.
Right. And in the same way, one of the ways we serve as creating safety for a couple is to have some limitations on where those emotions will go. Because there are some that would get out of control with new information. And There's simply limitations to how far we'll let that go.
Right.
They're not allowed to do certain things or to hurt people or hurt our building or whatever it is. So,
Furniture.
or furniture. And so, sometimes when we decide to tell the truth about something really hard, it is helpful to have others who are there that can help us keep that safety.
Yeah. And we kind of talked about this earlier, that truth is not just the regurgitation of accurate facts. And a lot of times, early on in recovery, especially when we're preparing for a full disclosure, the idea is, and it makes sense, the woman wants the clear, accurate facts, what happened. And what's true is the man may even have a desire for that and may want to share that, but his memory is flawed, or there are certain things that are blurry. And so in that case, I like talking about transparency, because with transparency, the desire is I want to be completely open, honest, and thorough with what I remember. And I may not remember everything, but I'm committed to remembering. And even if I remember something later, I will share it with you. But I'm going to be transparent with you. There may be facts I'm not remembering accurately. There may be details that I'm missing. But as I get clearer about those things, I do want to share those with you because I want to be transparent.
Mm-hmm.
And Deb, how do you prepare a wife for full disclosure to not overreact?
Well, we do that by encouraging her to have support around her when she goes in there. And also, it's part of my job to watch her and to try to intervene if I see her shutting down or becoming overreactive or dissociating, so that we can stop the process for a time and talk about things, even talk about whether we need to go on or stop it at that point.
Okay.
So again, having an advocate with you, I think, is very helpful. Having people prior to, knowing they're praying for you for this process, or available to you afterwards to discuss
Again, back to
what
that
you
strength
learned.
of community.
Absolutely. So it's why we don't do full disclosure immediately, because there are some things we need in place for it to be as effective as it can be, knowing that it's a hard thing to do.
Right.
Yeah. I would just say that, telling the truth is a huge privilege to someone in a relationship. Knowing that you're willing to tell the truth is really one of the greatest gifts you can give someone. It not only creates safety for you, but it is a way of looking into their heart and trusting you with, even though I may not be all that you need me to be or want me to be at times, that you would still be with me. And building that kind of trust, I think, is way beyond the behavioral solution kind of trust that you build by telling about things and about behavior. So I think ultimately, when our couples start thriving, it's that their truth telling is about what you're feeling today. I had a horrible day at work. I'm so stressed out, and I'm so tempted to do unhealthy things and eat badly, or historically I might have acted out, but today what I know I really need is just to have some downtime, maybe go to a movie with you and go out for a nice dinner. Right. So we're learning how to take our emotions and be honest with them, and then figure out what we need from those, and share that with another person who then can maybe be available to us in a healthy way in terms of moving forward.
Well, I also think, we talk a lot about this idea of do-overs. And so what's true is sometimes we get a do-over and we need a do-over. I know that for me, that managing my image, I often talked about the fact that it was like I was living life with a 5-second delay. And in those 5 seconds, I tried to figure out what was the appropriate answer, what I was supposed to say, or how I was supposed to look. And that 5 seconds kept me from being authentic. And so what would happen is Beth might ask, how you doing, or something bothering you? And my immediate reaction might be, oh, no, I'm fine. Because that's what I was used to saying, and I was still in that reality. And so sometimes I would have to come back and say, oh, well, actually, when you asked me earlier if something was bothering me, or how I was feeling, and I said I was okay or fine, the reality is I'm very anxious. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to be honest with you at the beginning, but I got triggered into some fear, and so I got to come back and get clear and say, you know what, I'm feeling anxious today. Or yes, there is something bothering. When you mentioned this and you said that, it really hurt my feelings, and I'm not sure how to talk about that, and so I just said nothing was bothering me. And so in our coupleships, when we start to see these places where we have hidden and lied, even if it's in a subtle thing and something we might dismiss, it's important that we come back and talk about it and own that I wasn't congruent, I wasn't honest when you asked that question earlier.
Mm-hmm. I love do-overs. You know, when we teach them here, people are like, that is the most amazing thing. You know, I don't know why it seems so unusual to be able to come back and own something that wasn't quite right, or you didn't speak the truth, or you know, did something poorly, and just try to do it again and have another chance. But we definitely believe in all those second chances to try to be more accurate about what's really going on for us, and it leads us more and more into being that truth teller that we want to be.
And we've kind of talked about this, but I do think that as a couple is able to feel safe enough to come towards each other and really engage the relationship, it's about honesty and transparency on both parts. You know, how am I not fully bringing myself to this relationship? What parts of me am I holding back in order to try to create safety? Is there a conversation that I'm avoiding? And that was always something that I had to pay attention to, and to be honest, still have to pay attention to, is there something, a conversation that I feel drawn to have with Beth, or I need to have with Beth, or would be important to have with Beth, and I find myself resistant to doing it? Well, what do I need to move towards something that would be difficult or challenging? And that's that ongoing idea of transparency. Yes, I have an option not to say anything, and that really doesn't serve either one of us. Can I find the courage to bring up a topic that might be difficult for us to navigate, but I can have hope that we can navigate it together?
You know, I often say that those that struggle with anger or rage or explosive anger, you know, get a lot of attention, you know, and you need to do anger management and all that. But I've often come to believe, because I'm on the other side of being a withdrawer, that there is just as much damage in terms of being truthful when I'm withdrawing, because you don't know what I'm feeling and thinking and needing. And so when I think about Mark's and my relationship earlier on, yes, he had a hidden agenda and he was doing things that were not truthful. And I was also not sharing a lot of my truth about some of my sorrow, my sadness, my aloneness. And so he had no idea that that was going on for me. So moving into a thriving relationship was really him getting honest about what he was doing, me getting honest about what I was feeling and thinking and needing. And as we both started, you know, bringing that truth to our relationship, it just started to grow and grow and grow.
You know, one of the things that we often hear at some point early in the recovery is that couples will say, this is the most honest we've ever been in the relationship. It's still difficult, it's still painful, and maybe there's not even a hope that we can make it, and we are being honest with each other for the first time. And that can be a very difficult place to be in, but it can also be a very healing place, as some things that have been hidden are starting to come out, some intuition that the wife has had is being validated. I do want to just check in around this, because I know that this is an issue that couples can deal with. There are times when a wife has a question, and the husband's answer is, I don't remember, you know, or I don't know. And that is the truthful answer, and it's not the answer maybe that she was wanting to hear, and even that answer is painful. How would you encourage a couple to navigate that when it's not that there's intentional deception and he's keeping something, it's just that at this point in his journey, he doesn't remember it?
Well, I usually talk a bit about what we know in terms of what we call thawing out from an addictive behavior or a substance, either one. That, you know, we use these behaviors and substances to medicate or avoid certain emotions. And what is true is that, and memories, to be honest, it allows us to move into, excuse me, microphone, kind of a compartmentalized part of our life where we're only doing what we're doing to feel better and comfort ourselves about something. So what is true is that sometimes we need a period of sobriety from whatever that substance or behavior was in order to start bringing up some of those memories that we have suppressed and the emotions around them. It's why some people in our field don't do full disclosure for many, many months into the process, even a year down the road, which in our case we feel is a little too long to wait for a wife to not live in truth. But I would remind them that oftentimes more of what is remembered comes up the longer one has been in sobriety.
Right.
And the truth is, some of us are just better at remembering things than others. You know, I just know I'm not particularly. If someone asked me about, the last 50 years of my life, I mean, I would have a hard time with a lot of details. I just don't work that way. Mark could tell you everything about everything from the first time we met. I mean, he had that kind of a brain.
He could tell you what you were doing 20 years ago.
Yeah, he could. Yeah, and where we were and what I was wearing, and I mean the whole 9 yards. So, I mean, some of it's neurochemical also. But I think what we say is, when you do remember, if you do, offer that information. Decide to be a truth teller. Now that you know, offer that information. Don't wait necessarily for her to find out or to have to ask again. And that in itself is helping you to be a better truth teller.
Right. And I would say part of it too is you may never get the answer to that question. And it may be a very important question. And so part of it is believing I can be safe even if I don't have the answer to that question. But if my safety is tied to the answer to that question, then I will never feel safe. And again, we're going to encourage the man. The goal is to be transparent. So if you do remember it, you bring it, you offer it, you let her know. And, we believe the more you remember, the more you remember. And so there may come a time down the road that the guy understands and remembers. But I often talk about part of the issue of addiction is we are not fully present. We are using the addiction to escape. And so it's kind of like asking a drunk person what happened last night. Well, that may be difficult for him to remember because he wasn't fully present because of the alcohol. Well, in the same way, we are having these experiences that we're not fully present in. And so therefore, there may be some significant facts or details that aren't accessible and may never be accessible.
I would just like to end. I know I'm getting the look, but end by saying I hear too often from clients that they have spoken to professionals who tell them, once a liar, always a liar. You're just never going to be able to trust that person. And I would have, maybe I'm naive or whatever, and maybe it comes from our years of working with people here, but I just don't believe that. And I don't believe we would work with our clientele if we didn't have the hope that with practice and community and truth that they can change. And, there may be some that it comes easier for than others, depending on how many years in their life they've used this coping technique to survive. But I also know that it is possible, and that's where we have our hope here, and hope our clients do too. It's always possible to change. And so we're going to help a person as much as possible to do what they need to do to please God with their life and to become a truth teller and watch the value of growing closer to people when they do that.
Well, and again, we're back to that principle, the promise that the truth is going to set us free. And what I see in men is the more they live in the truth and the more freedom they experience, the more freedom they desire.
Yeah.
Well, Debbie, thank you so much for joining us again today. It's always great to have you on the podcast. Greg, you're here every time.
That's right.
I mean,
And we still love you.
Yeah,
Even though you have to be.
Yes, we're not going to push away from you, so don't worry about us. We continue to love you. So, but thank you. I hope that many of our listeners out there are encouraged by this. If you desire to be a truth teller, listen to these sage words of wisdom. They know of what they speak. If you're a man that's out there struggling with sexual purity issues, we invite you to visit faithfulandtrue.com and click on the workshops, and you'll read all about the Men of Valor Workshop, where you can come and in a 3-day intensive workshop really get to the bottom of your personal story and discover through Greg's great teaching style if maybe you have been lacking in the category of truth telling. So we encourage you to do that. The same for the women's workshops. We've got a women's workshop coming up in November, It's the last one of 2021, and we encourage the wives to look into that. We hope that these events can be transformative in your lives as well. Until we come back and see you again, we thank you, and we hope that this coming week is going to be a week that's filled with many blessings and with great vision.